The numbers no longer shock, but they should. Every single month, 20,000 to 25,000 Russian soldiers are dying in Ukraine. Not wounded, not missing, dead. That is not a battle. That is an industrial process. In the Soviet war in Afghanistan, 20,000 soldiers died over 10 years. Today, Russia loses that many in 1 month, and yet the war does not stop. Missiles still fly, drones still fall, cities still go dark. This is what modern war looks like when time replaces strategy, when mass replaces maneuver, when human lives become a renewable resource. If you want to understand how wars are really fought in the 21st century, not on maps but on bodies, stay with me, because the most important story here is not about territory, it is about sustainability. And that is where the real danger begins. This war is often described as a stalemate. That word is misleading. What we are seeing is not paralysis, it is attrition. Russia is advancing, but barely. Since January 2024, Russian forces have seized about 5,000 square kilometers. That is less than 1% of Ukraine's territory. The cost? Almost 1 million total casualties. As many as 250,000 killed, according to CSIS. This is the core imbalance. Enormous losses, minimal gains. Ukraine, meanwhile, absorbs wave after wave of attacks, missiles, drones, strikes on power grids and heating systems. Hundreds of thousands are left without electricity in winter. So the real question is not who is winning today, it is who can endure tomorrow. Because wars like this are not decided by breakthroughs. They are decided by systems, by production, by tolerance for pain. This war did not begin as a war of attrition, but it became one. Over time, strategy narrowed, speed disappeared, decisive victory faded. What remained was volume, firepower, and endurance. Russia adapted by doing what large states have done for centuries. It turned to scale, round-the-clock weapons production, contiguous missile and drone launches, pressure without pause, not to win quickly, but to exhaust slowly. Ukraine, meanwhile, built its defense around resistance, not just holding ground, but absorbing force. The result is a grinding cycle. Losses accumulate, territory barely shifts, each month resets the same equation. More soldiers sent forward, more bodies added to the count. This is why comparisons to past wars matter, not because history repeats, but because systems reveal themselves over time. And in this system, progress is measured less in kilometers and more in casualties. Then came the moments that made the cost impossible to ignore. Not a single battle, but a pattern. Missiles and drones launched again and again, targeting energy sites, power stations, critical infrastructure, Kyiv, Dnipro, Zhytomyr, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Kherson, regions spread across the country, all struck within weeks. The objective was not territory, it was pressure. As temperatures dropped below freezing, hundreds of thousands were left without electricity, without heating. This was attrition extended beyond the battlefield, from soldiers to civilians, from fronts to homes. At the United Nations, the language shifted. These strikes were called a dangerous and inexplicable escalation, because once energy becomes a target, time becomes a weapon. Cold replaces fear, darkness replaces warning, and endurance is tested not in trenches, but in living rooms. What keeps this war going is not momentum, it is machinery. Behind the front lines, Russia has built a system designed for loss. Weapons are produced around the clock. Missiles, drones, artillery, not for precision, for volume. The logic is brutally simple. If losses are constant, replacement must be faster. Soldiers are treated as inputs. Time is treated as leverage. This is why monthly deaths of 20,000 to 25,000 do not trigger retreat. The system absorbs them as long as factories run, as long as recruitment continues, as long as escalation feels manageable. This is not about tactical brilliance. It is about institutional tolerance. A belief that endurance itself is victory. But systems like this carry a hidden flaw. They assume society can remain detached, that human cost can stay abstract. History suggests otherwise. The second crisis is not sudden. It is cumulative. Month after month, 20,000 to 25,000 dead. Again and again. No decisive breakthrough. No clear end. Only repetition. This is where attrition turns inward. When the battlefield stops being the only place that bleeds. Because losses on this scale are not invisible forever. Families notice. Communities notice. The state notices. Especially when the gains remain small. 5,000 square kilometers since early 2024, less than 1% of the country. This is the moment when sustainability becomes the real front line. Not ammunition, not missiles, but tolerance. How long can a system demand sacrifice without delivering meaning? How long can production replace persuasion? The danger here is not collapse tomorrow. It is erosion over time. At this point, the war stops being abstract, and it starts to look like you, because while strategies grind forward, life narrows. Imagine winter nights without power. No heat, no light. Missiles and drones don't just hit infrastructure. They hit routines, sleep, normalcy. You plan your day around electricity, around warmth, around uncertainty. This is what attrition feels like on the ground. Not heroism, not headlines, but endurance. Hundreds of thousands are pushed into survival mode, not because of a single strike, but because of repetition. And that is the cruel genius of this kind of war. It doesn't ask for surrender. It asks for patience. Wars like this are won not when people give up, but when they grow numb. That is why civilians are no longer collateral. They are part of the mechanism. What happens in Ukraine does not stay in Ukraine, because wars of attrition export instability. Every missile strike sends a signal. Every escalation recalibrates risk. This is why NATO no longer speaks in short-term terms. Russia is framed as a long-term threat, a state willing to absorb massive losses while gaining almost nothing, forces others to plan for endurance, not resolution. Energy systems feel it first, markets adjust, security doctrines harden, and when infrastructure is targeted deliberately, the precedent travels. Other actors watch. They learn. This war becomes a case study in how pressure is applied without crossing red lines. The future splits into three paths. The first is managed endurance. Losses remain high. Gains remain small. The second is negotiated exhaustion. Not peace born of trust, but of limits. The third is the most dangerous. Escalation through frustration. When wars stop rewarding patience, they tempt recklessness. None of these paths promise victory. They promise consequence. This war teaches a hard lesson. Modern conflict is no longer about speed. It is about systems. A system that can lose 20,000 to 25,000 people a month and continue is not strong. A system that gains less than 1% of territory after 1 million casualties is not advancing. Wars like this do not explode. They erode. They reshape what the world accepts as normal. And once suffering becomes routine, it becomes easier to repeat. That is why understanding matters.